You are listening to Dove Valley Deep Divers with Erick Trickel
and Lance Sanderson.
Ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
On Overtime Media.
And it looks like we are live. Let me get just a second here so that I can add our Facebook group to the stream. And it looks like we are good to go. Mile high hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as per usual, is my good friend and colleague. He is Mile High Huddle senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. Erick, man, week after the draft, have a week now to digest everything. We're going to break some stuff down for you guys, but man, how you feeling about how George Paton did in his first year as the general manager of the Denver Broncos, man?
I think he did very well. I mean, he trusted his board. He let it fall to him. And the fact that they wanted tackles, they missed out on tackles, and they didn't reach for another one, I absolutely love that aspect of it, just that little bit of information that came out. Love what he did and everything. And I just got to say, it feels like it's been a lot longer than a week since the draft. Like, it feels like it's been 2-3 weeks since it's just been such a long week. Excited to be here, excited to recap the draft and put a cap on it with a good friend of ours, a good friend of the shows and everything, getting his opinion and a coach's take on some of these players. Super excited for that and super excited for the next year. I mean, next week we're starting on 2022 draft stuff.
Hey, Kayvon Thibodeau, number 1 overall. Let's go. That dude is a monster, man. Holy cow. He's so good. So good. He would have been a top 5 pick this year, probably. If he could have come out, he would have been a top 5 pick. That's the edge rusher from Oregon, by the way. Just to show that we're already starting on that as well. But no, it's been a lot of fun to kind of really digest everything. Obviously, after Thursday night, I was pretty disappointed. But now that I really think about it, I mean, this draft class, the Broncos did a really good job. Like you said, staying true to their board, picking players with some special teams versatility, getting a big value in Jamar Johnson in the 5th round as well. I love Caden Stearns too. We were sitting here talking with our friend before we bring him on, and Kerry Vincent about what we thought about him and everything. So, yeah, I think the Broncos did a really good job, really, again, bolstering that secondary depth, getting some better special teams plays and stuff like that. So I think that George Paton did a pretty decent job. And if you look at everything in a vacuum, I mean, honestly, how can you not – I know draft grades are something that not everybody necessarily likes, but they're for more entertainment value. But as far as I'm concerned, if I was going to put a grade on it, it would be like an A-, maybe even an A grade. What do you think, Erick?
I mean – doing grades, I would probably give them an A. I mean, I did my article this week about the valuing of the draft for each and every team in comparison to where they took players to my big board. And granted, I know that their big board is different. I know there's a bunch of other factors involved because they have a lot more information with injuries and stuff like that. And they had the best value. They were the number 1 team in terms of value compared to my big board. The only 2 players that were reaches were Patrick Surtain and then Marquise Spencer, and like everybody else was great value for them. So they did a really good job, and I absolutely love that they stuck to their board. I can't stress that enough. Yeah,
I mean, there were some rumblings going around. I think it was Mike Kliss that said on 104.3 The Fan earlier this week that they had Tommy Doyle as a guy that they really liked in the 5th round. It was actually the pick that they were going to take Jamar Johnson, and Doyle was taking a couple picks before then, and they stuck with their board and went with the next best player on their board in Johnson, even though they just took Caden Stearns' 12th pick earlier. Let's see here. Let's say hello to the chat really fast, guys, before we do our Manscaped read. Mike Givens, what's up, man? Travis Bruley jumping in here. Greg Smith on Facebook. Dylan Von Arks with those Beartooth tickets, man. I'm jealous. I was going to get Beartooth tickets, but there's a Lamb of God concert that same weekend, so we're going to go see Lamb of God and Megadeth for the last time that Megadeth is touring. Malachi jumping in here, shouting out. Where's that at here? Matt Carroll. There it is. Matt Carroll, the Ole Miss quarterback. The Broncos will be taking next year as their quarterback.
And it's funny that you actually mentioned that because before we went live, we were checking out a little bit of him. He's the guy that keep being told is going to be that big riser next year. What I saw, I mean, he's got a lot of work to be that big riser. We'll see, though.
Yeah, I don't know. The athleticism's nice, and he's really got to work on that footwork. But at the same time, I mean, the arm strength pops. I mean, you can see that he kind of at least has an idea of what he's looking at in front of him, processes at least somewhat decently. We watched one interception where it's not exactly sure what he was going there. But anyways, again, back to the comments here. Travis Bruley jumping in here on YouTube. Let's see here. Malachi as well. That's pretty much it for everybody. Now, guys, before we really get started on everything tonight, I just want to remind you that today's show is being brought to you, as always, by Manscaped. Guys, 2020 sucked. 2021, we're off on a great start. The vaccine's getting out. People are starting to move around. The restrictions are starting to open up and everything like that. So if you let yourself go in quarantine and you need to refresh and get yourself in the best tip-top shape as far as your male grooming is concerned, there's no better way to do that than the precision-engineered tools at Manscaped. Guys, Eric, what do you have for us today?
Well, as always, I have what they call the shed. It's a little travel case. If you guys do a lot of traveling, this is perfect for you for your little travel bag. You can carry all your bathroom goodies in there. I mean, you have your deodorant for down there. That's called the Preserver. And, of course, but the best thing is the Lawnmower 3.0. And one of the best things about it is that it comes with the little light. And, hey, maybe I could use that scary stories. But I mean, last thing you want to do is when you're working down there is cut yourself, and that extra light is actually very handy. So it's a lot of good products from them. I mean, one of the best things that I have from them is their boxer briefs. Super comfortable, super soft, super nice. Absolutely love them. And real quick, I got to give a shout out to one more person, Malcolm Brown from Ogden, Kansas. Malcolm, I hope you're having a good time. Again, congratulations on your new grandchild.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Congratulations. But back to Manscaped here. One of the nicest things about the Lawnmower 3.0 is, and actually I just used mine earlier today to kind of clean up my beard and whatnot, is the blades are replaceable. They just pop right in, pop right out. They're easy to change. They're relatively cheap, and they work really well. They don't miss hairs. I mean, they leave you well kept and well groomed every single time you use them. Now, guys, the easiest way to get this stuff is go to manscaped.com. Use the promo code HUDDLE at checkout. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping on everything you guys order. Again, manscaped.com, promo code HUDDLE for 20% off and free shipping. Your boys, your wife, and everybody around you are going to thank you because you're going to look at tip-top shape. Now, Eric, do we want to grab him really fast? Should we grab the man?
I guess we should bring him in.
All right. Well, guys, good friend of the show here. Yeah, get him out of here. Good friend of the show here, Coach Luc Polglaze, the wide receivers coach and former running backs coach for Kenyon College out there in Ohio. Correct? I always forget that.
Yeah, that's us.
Yep. So, Luke. I know that you have some major draft crush going on here about what the Broncos have done. How are you, man? It's a pleasure to get you back on the show. I cannot wait to get into this insight.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back, guys. I think it's been about a month since I was last on, so I think that's a new record. I've yet to get the cane yanking me off stage so far, so I'm thankful for that and thankful to be back, guys. Great to be here.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to get you on because every time we talk with you, I learn so much. I really do. Learn more schematically, learn more about techniques and everything like that. So it is really good to get those coaches' insights. And the last time we had you on, we were talking about cornerbacks. Well, now the Broncos took a couple of offensive skill position players and obviously Javonte Williams Javonte Williams and Seth Williams, the wide receiver from Auburn, as well as Quinn Miners, the interior offensive lineman from Wisconsin Whitewater. Now, obviously, we're going to get into a whole bunch of this stuff, but first things first, we got to talk about the cornerback the Broncos took over Justin Fields, Pat Surtain at the number 9 overall pick. What were your really big indications? What were your first thoughts about the pick, and what do you really think about Patrick Surtain?
Yeah, well, I'm not nearly enough of a draftnik as much as you guys are. I can't tell you about value for the pick. I mean, I'm out here in the middle of Ohio, where 2 hours north is Browns country, 2 hours south is Bengals country. Right here around Columbus, the only pro team is Ohio State. So I've been just surrounded by nothing but love for Justin Fields. So given that, I was probably a little bit bummed that they passed on him, just because I wanted to see the surrounding countryside go a little bit crazy. But in terms of the value, I mean, they're getting a guy who's going to get some time to adjust to the NFL, right? Anytime you draft a guy and you already have several solid cornerbacks on your roster, he's going to get some time to develop. And when you look at a guy like Surtain, I think he's a very pro-ready guy. He's a very patient cornerback. Really what I saw in college was they really didn't do, opposing offenses didn't really throw at him a lot. Anytime they did throw the ball at his receiver, they used, meshes or picks or, even double moves just to try and kind of do anything that they could to get that receiver open. But he's, really fluid player, just super smooth in his movement. And I know I made the comparison last time that, he's the guy that you just kind of feel like better than to throw the ball at his side.
So obviously, before we had you on last time, I remember when we were talking about it, you texted me after the Kyle Fuller, Ronald Darby, with Bryce Callahan in tow, how can you imagine the Broncos utilizing Patrick Surtain this year?
Yeah, I think he's going to be a matchup guy. I know we were kind of talking about this a little bit off air, but I think cornerback, as much as any other position, is probably the hardest position to adjust to first year in the NFL. I mean, you look at a guy like Surtain, and he's gone up against the cream of the crop, right? The SEC has been absolutely loaded with extremely talented receivers over the past few years. You look at the LSUs and the Ole Misses of the world. But, you get to the NFL and all of a sudden you're going up against, a veteran who spent, 5-10 years just honing his craft. You're that little rookie and he knows your deficiencies before you do. So he's going to have a year to adjust. He's going to have a year to kind of sit behind, a guy like Kyle Fuller, who's been one of the top 5 cornerbacks in the league. And he's going to get a year to kind of learn the secrets of the trade. And I think that's going to make him a lot better for it. Now, will he be an instant impact guy? Realistically, probably not. But this is a draft pick that my assumption is, Denver kind of made knowing that they were going to get a year of developing him. And then, really, if it happens this year, great. But otherwise, they're just going to unleash him once he's gotten the chance to sit and learn a little bit.
Now, before we get to Javonte Williams, I have one more question for you. And it's based off of something Vic Fangio said. And he admitted that on tape, you didn't really get to see it, but they believe that Patrick Surtain can work in the nickel. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think he can work in the nickel?
Yeah, I think the one thing you really see with him, which is kind of unusual from any kind of outside quarterback, is he's aggressive, right? He's physical. You see him play through screens and just blow those up for tackles for loss. And, that's not something you often see from a college cornerback, right? We talk about the stereotype of cornerbacks as being, shying away from physicality, not wanting to tackle. That's probably more true with some guys than others, but you look at a guy like Surtain and he takes that on, man. He relishes that. And if you want to survive in the slot, no matter your size, you look at a guy like Chris Harris, undersized, yes, but scrappy as all get out. You always knew he was going to stick his nose in, he was going to make a play. And, for that reason, I wouldn't be surprised if they just look at his physicality as a trait and say, yeah, we know that this guy's going to be able to survive in the slot day one.
So something that I found interesting before we move on, I just want to toss this out there as well. Pat Surtain coming in as tall as he was, as long as he was, with the great weight and the athleticism and everything. If you look at I don't know if you know the spider graphs. I can't remember. I think it's mockdraftable.com. Yeah. Those spider graphs. He was an 85% comparison to Derwin James.
86.3.
Exactly. So 86.3% comparable to Derwin James, the safety of the Chargers. And they really kind of got him in to be that Travis Kelce killer to take care of Darren Waller. Do you think that that's a role that the Broncos could use him as, is not sliding him on the outside, but we're going to line him up against Travis Kelce and see if we can finally solve that problem for the Broncos that's been going on since, 2012?
You're kind of testing my draft knowledge here a few years back with Derwin James, but if I remember, he kind of played all over the field a little bit for Florida State, right?
Yep.
He was kind of that guy who did a lot of different things. And when you're at Alabama, when Coach Saban looks at you and says, Pat, I want you to lock down one side of the field, you're going to do that. They don't need to move you around. I think he has the versatility athletically, certainly based on that. Physicality wise, he's going to have some adjustments. Sure, it's fine for him to do that against receivers, but when you've got, again, a Travis Kelce or a Darren Waller, just some of the tight ends, even within the conference, within the division, those are some big boys. So, is that long-term potentially a role for him? Maybe. But again, I think he's going to need quite a bit of development before he gets there, just in terms of, adjusting to a new scheme. He basically, a lot of the time, Alabama just kind of put him out on an island and said, you know what, if you want to beat him, you can figure out a way to do it. Otherwise, we just trust him to lock down that side of the field.
Yeah.
All right. Now, want to move on to Javonte Williams and let you gush over him, because this seems to be the pick that all of Broncos country is kind of sleeping on, and just like either hates it because of the trade up or because the whole mantra of running backs don't matter. And you can go on a tirade about that as a former running backs coach and how they do matter and everything. But just give us a quick breakdown of Javonte Williams and what he brings to the Broncos.
Well, first and foremost, running backs matter. You got to keep running backs coaches employed, man. The running back is a dying breed. And I think really when you look at it, there's no more friendly a thing on the football field to a young quarterback than a guy who we can turn around and give the ball to and have some trust in him. I know I told you guys you're going to have to slow me up here because I'm just going to go a little bit crazy on Javonte here. But, I think when you look at North Carolina and what he was asked to do, he ran a lot of different schemes. He's run inside zone with a split. He's run power, counter, mid zone, pin and pull. And what he does is he's just so fast mentally. First and foremost, he's well coached, but he takes coaching well. When he's approaching the mesh, right, when he's about to get the ball from the quarterback, his eyes are already on his keys. He's already reading the defense. He's not looking at the quarterback giving him the ball, right? He's already thought, in his mind, he's a step beyond getting the ball. He's already looking at where he wants to go. And I think when you look at that, I think there's a great example. That's slipping my mind who it was against, but it's split zone, tight end goes back across, and both of the linebackers with the tight end going back across, they kind of bump across, tracing that tight end. And so he ends up one-on-one with the safety at 3 yards. He just anticipates that, knows that that's happening, and he's just decisive. He says, look, the safety's coming down to make the play. As a coach, anytime the safety's trying to make a play at 3 yards, you love that, right? Because that's the extra hitter for the defense. That's the guy you're not accounting for scheme-wise. So if he's coming up to make the play, we're good with that. He stiff arms him, runs through the contact, gets vertical. This guy's not going to, you're not going to be able to bring him down with ankle tackles. And I got plenty more things that I'd love to talk about with him. I'll kind of hit pause real quick. But, yeah, just mentally in terms of his own thought processing, he's already a couple steps ahead before he even gets the ball. He's reading the defense and reading flow. And that just to me shows that he's super coachable, that a coach has just drilled in for him. Hey, don't look at the mesh point. Start reading the defense. Start knowing where you're going to go, because then you're a step ahead when you need to actually make a cut and be decisive.
And Robert here, he actually came in with a question that was very close to the one I was getting ready to ask. He asked, how do Gordon and Williams differ in styles? And I was going to ask is, where do they differ, and how can they use that to be complementary to each other?
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at Gordon, and he's kind of more your power back, right? He's kind of a bigger back. He gets behind his pads, and I think in that regard, Williams is not that different from him as a runner, right? They're both bruising, physical running backs. And so stylistically, you've added a guy who's very similar. Instead of a thunder and lightning, you've got a thunder and a thunder. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that by any means, because the two of them can kind of just grind a defense down by the fourth quarter. I think my thing where I see Melvin Gordon kind of separating himself is I think that he's kind of a little bit stiffer, right? He's going to make that one cut and get vertical, whereas I think Javonte has a little bit more wiggle, a little bit more juice than people kind of give him credit for, right? He's going to be able to stick his foot in the ground and get vertical, but he's got a little bit of shimmy. He's got just enough of a low center of gravity with great balance that he just pops off of tackles laterally. Whereas a guy like Melvin Gordon is just kind of more inclined to take those head on.
Now, the dream is always having that 3-down back, the guy who can run, the guy who can block, and the guy who can catch. We've heard a lot about his running ability. Does he have what it takes to be a receiver out of the backfield and a blocker as well?
Yeah, and I think first and foremost, right, you want to talk about a running back. There's kind of basically 4 categories if you want to look at it that way. You've got your pass blocking, you've got your receiving, you've got your inside runs and your outside runs. For me, Javonte Williams is a absolutely complete running back. He can handle any run that you ask him to, and in that same measure, they ask him to do a lot of things. He's not just a guy who runs power and counter. He runs zone, he runs some pin and pull, and so he does a good job with getting to some of that lateral stuff. UNC didn't really ask him to do a ton in the receiving game. It's kind of something where you kind of want to see him, really produce that at the NFL. I don't think he's really a guy who you're going to line up and then motion him out to get into empty. Just doesn't strike me as kind of his deal per se. But in terms of the passing game, he's a very capable pass blocker. I'm kind of curious to see how he does in some more complex pass pro schemes where he's actually, asked to read the defense and analyze the defense and know his backers and his edge keys and who he's reading in case they blitz. I think that his mental processing from a run game standpoint is incredibly advanced, so I have every expectation he'd be able to handle that without a problem. I guess that's just kind of the one thing that I'd love to see him really do at the next level.
So something that I noticed when I was watching Javonte Williams is his patience and his vision and the way that he manipulates the line of scrimmage and presses the hole and then really accelerates through the hole and bounces off contact in the hole and then gets to the second level with speed. Specifically against the Florida State, that Florida State tape, there was a couple of runs where I think it was outside zone. They were stretching the line horizontally, and he really just kind of press it, and then bounce back 2 holes actually to get vertical. Was that something that impressed with you, and is that something that really translates in this Broncos offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I really kind of caught when I watched him is, and I think he's kind of from that era where a lot of younger running backs were watching a lot of Le'Veon Bell, and that kind of patience and not quite hesitation, but just kind of slowing things down. And really at the end of the day, when you're running, any kind of zone concept or where you're reading for flow or for a cutback, right, you're waiting for the defender to commit. You're waiting for him to go one way or the other, and then you're making your cut based on that. So when it comes to that, I think patience is incredibly key. That, your linebackers of today, they're impatient, right? They want to come up and make a play. And the key about inside zone is whatever way they go, you're making it wrong, right? You're cutting opposite them. So I think his patience is great. And I think that, whatever level of football you're at, if you're patient, if you're waiting for the other guy to make a mistake that then you immediately seize on that, I think that's going to translate well.
Yeah. Jake King jumping in here with the $10 super chat. I'm hopeful to see Hamler have more production this season after using a second rounder on him. What role will he have, and are there just too many other weapons on the team for him to shine? Eric, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on KJ Hamler here.
Well, first I want to ask Luke, did we have you watch KJ Hamler last year before you came on?
I don't think so. I think you had me watch a lot of outside guys more so. I remember Rager was an inside guy, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with him is the biggest thing is that Hamler is going to have to stay out there on the field. He dealt with injuries last year. It saw him miss the first little bit of the season and then again towards the end of the season. And I think a little bit during too, but I can't remember for sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a smaller guy. And the other thing is he can't drop 25% of passes that are thrown his way. If he wants to have a role, that's the easiest way to lose it. I like him. I like what he can bring with this offense because it's something that the Broncos don't really have. Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, they're all guys who bring something very different from what Hamler does. He's kind of that gadget type weapon. So there's definitely a role for him. It's just he's got to improve on certain areas and key areas for him to really keep that role.
Well, and I think a big part of that is going back to the training camp and the injuries and everything like that. Cortland Sutton, week 2, tears his ACL, and that really forced KJ Hamler into a role that he wasn't ready for. Like, quite honestly, everyone said that KJ Hamler was going to have to develop in training camp, and they were going to bring him along slowly. And that was that was really the case, especially when he had that hamstring injury back in training camp as well. So when Cortland Sutton goes down, KJ Hamler is now thrust in that full-time slot role. It takes away from the value of him and his gadget explosiveness because they're force feeding him the ball a little bit more than they actually wanted to. And it also took away something else that he adds to this team. And I'm really hoping that they work in this direction this year, especially if Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, and Jerry Jeudy are all able to stay healthy. He's an explosive kick returner and punt returner, guys. Like, he has the ability to do that. And if you can kick Deontay Spencer off this roster, add in another that sixth cornerback, because that's probably where the Broncos are going to go with as deep as this cornerback room is. I mean, there's definitely an opportunity there for them to win and save that special team slot with KJ Hamler. So to me, having everybody healthy on the offensive weapon side, I mean, getting Albert Okwuegbunam involved as well, a little bit more Noah Fant as well. Obviously, now you've got Javonte Williams in tow. With KJ Hamler, you lessen his role a little bit, get him the ball in some creative ways, and just let him go to work with that high-end athleticism. Now, Luke, do you want to go ahead.
One thing that you said is, I don't think necessarily that if they look to kick off Deontay Spencer with KJ Hamler, I think that's the right way to go. But I don't think it'll necessarily be for an extra corner. I think it'll be for a different sixth receiver. I mean, don't forget that we have Cortland Sutton coming back from injury. They just drafted Seth Williams. Maybe they don't feel they can sneak him onto the practice squad, and they decide to keep him as extra insurance. And, of course, with everything going around about with Aaron Rodgers and Denver possibly being them, maybe they decide to send Tim Patrick that way as well, which would then open that spot. And also, thank you, Gary Leeds, for your star donation. We definitely appreciate that. Now, Luke, real quick before Lance asks you his other question, I remember we were live for the 2017 draft when they drafted Royce Freeman. Does Javonte Williams spell the end of Royce Freeman in Denver?
Yeah, I mean, I think this offseason has been interesting because Denver kind of, let a running back go with Phillip Lindsay, and they brought another one in now. And obviously they think very highly of him to trade up for him. And, really for me, when I look at the running back position, he's a guy who's going to touch the ball. You know, you talk about your top running backs, you want them touching the ball 20, 25 times a game. And that's really more than anybody else except your quarterback. So for me, you want to make sure that a guy is going to come in and have an impact on the offense. And, when it comes to Javonte Williams, I know that the fans are kind of split on him right now, but for me, if I'm a coach in that office, in that staff, I love Javonte because he does the little things and those matter. I know one thing that we talked about a little bit off air is, on any kind of RPO read or anything where the quarterback pulls the ball right to throw the ball, he carries out his run fake. He is still looks, for all intents and purposes, like he has the ball. He's still getting behind his blockers, and that's great because it shows that he's taking the little things to heart. He's doing the little things with coaching. I think he's a really consistent back. I think he's a guy who's, he just has skills that translate, I think, really early on at the NFL level. Ultimately, I think this is kind of a shot to Royce Freeman just saying, hey, how do you respond, right? How are you going to bounce back? Are you going to prove that you belong on this roster? But for me, when I look at Javonte, I think he's a really, really good running back. Like I said, a complete running back in the true sense of the word running. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, you want that guy standing right next to your quarterback. I absolutely think that he's a worthwhile addition.
Yeah, man, I love the pick. The only thing that I don't necessarily like about it, and this is something that Eric had said earlier, is running backs don't matter, dude. I'm telling you. No, that's no, for real. It's the trade up. The Broncos traded up from 40 to 35 to go and get him. They made a savvy move because Miami was going to take him at 36 per their intel. So they identified their guy and they went and they got him. And I can't fault George Payton for that. So, but also at the same time, it's just trading up for a running back on day two, especially early day two. It's a value thing there and position value with the running back. While they do matter, they don't matter at the same time. So still, though, I like it. The only thing I really hate about it is the trade up and the fact that the Broncos lost Richie Grant at number 40 overall to the Atlanta Falcons. I still called that move. Richie Grant went at 40, damn it. Anyways, moving on here. We asked you to watch some Quinn Miners. And Quinn Miners, this D3 interior offensive lineman from Wisconsin Whitewater, he is the belle of the ball, man. I'm telling you what, he's hilarious. He's fun to watch. He's got the gut. He pulls his shirt up and shows off his big, huge belly. What were your first impressions of Quinn Miners if you got a chance to take a look at him?
You guys are going to have to bear with a D3 ball coach talking about a D3 football player getting drafted on day 2 of the NFL draft, because we have not had one of those in a while. Not since Marpet, I want to say.
That sounds right.
Yeah,
Ollie Marpet at Hobart. Was it Hobart?
Yeah, which has been a while. So, I mean, in that sense, I'm thrilled, and I'm even more excited that he ended up with the Broncos because I think it's great. Whitewater is tremendous D3 ball. I mean, these guys, they're competitive. They play for the national championship just about every season, and they have some good athletes. So while it is D3, I respect any kind of football player, whether they're D1, 2, or 3, but that's about as good as it gets for D3. For him, I think he's just an incredibly strong, incredibly athletic guy. And I think that as a result, he's kind of gotten away with a little bit, against the guys that he's played against so far. And I think that's going to challenge him a little bit when he gets to the NFL, where strength and athleticism will only get you so far if you don't have the technique to kind of compensate and help you out. He kind of lunges a little bit at times. I think he just has the natural strength to just compensate for being in a bad position. But he's a road grader. He does a great job. When the near D lineman goes away from him, he gets his eyes to the spot, anticipating a twist. Right, if one guy goes away, we're anticipating another guy coming back to it. He's really strong with his near hand when he blocks. He gets his hips in front really effectively, really turns guys. He gets to the second level blocking a linebacker about as fast as a running back. It feels like he is just flying up there. And, one thing that you'll see guys do, and this is just such a sign of respect for an offensive lineman, is you'll see D linemen holding him. Like they'll actually grab a piece of his jersey so that he can't release cleanly up to the second level to block a linebacker. Now, part of that scheme, part of that saying, hey, the refs will never call a defensive holding on a D lineman, which is rare, but it's also just saying, hey, we got to keep our linebackers clean, man. This guy's going to just absolutely clean them up at the second level. So he's physical. He's a mauler. Obviously he's got some things to clean up technique wise, but man, like when you talk about a guy who you want to develop, this is your kind of guy.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we've heard a lot going around with their current center, Lloyd Cushenberry, is that he was a little soft, and they want to get tougher. And I think that one thing that all of us can agree on with watching Quinn Miners is that he is probably the farthest thing from soft that you can get. Like Sharman's all the way over here, I guess, whichever way you want to look at, and Quinn Miners is like way off. Like he is the farthest thing from soft.
Yeah, I think the other thing you have to look at too, he's a D3 guy, right? He has had to fight and scrap for everything he's been given as a football player. You put a guy like that in the NFL, he's going to work his butt off just trying to get himself the opportunity to play, to start, to be a difference maker, because he understands, right? Like he understands the other side of college football, when you're not, under the bright lights and ESPN isn't broadcasting your game. No, I say that they broadcast the D3 national championship and he's been there, but, he's a fiery kid. He's a competitor, and I have every expectation that he's going to come in and work hard. And, I'll just give a quick shout out to a guy who's been singing his praises for a long time. I'm going to probably screw up the pronunciation of his last name, but it's Owen Reese. On Twitter. Great guy. He was one of his coaches at Whitewater, has just been singing his praises since day one. Great guy. Got to give a shout out to another D3 ball coach. And he's proud of his guy, understandably.
Yeah, Robert Caswell jumping in here with a quick question. Did the Broncos get Quinn Miners to light a fire under the butts of the other interior offensive linemen? And this is something I want to answer. The interior of the offensive line for the Broncos wasn't necessarily all that bad. I mean, Cushenberry had some issues there. There was some communication gaps, and there's functional strength issues there. I think that this is a shot directly at Lloyd Cushenberry, quite honestly. I think that with the physicality that Miners has, the athleticism that he has, he's one of the most athletic guys for what he is as far as his size is concerned. Decent length as well and everything like that. So, if Cushenberry doesn't really take that next step this year and really work with what's his name? Everyone hates him. The strength and conditioning coach. His name is just failing me first. That's it. Lauren Landau. Thank you. He's got to go and build that functional strength. With Miners, something you see with him, and this maybe goes back to him as a D3 prospect. And Luke, I want your opinion here. As a D3 prospect, you have to go out there and if you want to get looks from the NFL, especially as a draft pick, you have to dominate your competition. Now, Quinn Miners absolutely dominated the competition at D3, and then he went to the Senior Bowl and he dominated there. Is that something that's going to translate for the Broncos and show some more domination? And can he potentially win a starting job this year?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the team, it just kind of depends. Is the team a team where you have to, prove yourself and, establish yourself for however many years, or will they say, hey, yeah, we'll start you as a rookie? I think that's really kind of a team question, to be honest. Like, are they a team who's going to let a guy walk in and have his chance to compete for that role? We saw that last year with Cushenberry. Like, my expectation is probably yes. But for a guy like Miners, going to the Senior Bowl, actually competing and winning reps against guys who have won far more recognition than he has across his career, that's awesome. Like, I think that gives him all the confidence in the world. And, when you're an offensive lineman, man, you're in the trenches. Like, you got the 4 guys around you. You got to be mentally strong. You got to be tough mentally just to really be able to stick together. And something like that, I think, is going to give him a ton of confidence. I really do. It's not uncommon for NFL scouts to do talent evaluations on top D3 guys. Like, they'll come to schools, they'll get measurements, they'll watch them work out, they'll watch them, play games and things like that. But it is rare to actually see them take that much of an interest that he gets a Senior Bowl invite.
That's crazy to me. Sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
Before we get on to Baron Browning and everything, I just want to say is, guys, if you have any questions, make sure you get them in. And of course, the best way to make sure that we can guarantee to get them answered is through a super chat. We'll try to get to what ones we have, but that's the one way to guarantee it. We'll try to get to them all, but time just may not be printing. So go ahead and get your questions in now. We're going to be talking about a little bit of everybody who the Broncos drafted and getting Luke's opinion of them. Outside of a couple, I get the later guys, but getting to Baron Browning. And you sent me, what was it, yesterday, I think it was, a message about him asking me where would I play him, or where do they plan on playing him. So why don't we go ahead and start off there? Like, quick breakdown of Baron Browning and why you asked me that anyways.
I mean, it was kind of a loaded question. I kind of, going into it, I had a pretty good idea of where I would play him. I just wanted a second opinion. For me, he's super, super athletic. He takes on blockers well. I don't love the way he gets off blocks, but I like the physicality that he gets to a block with. For me, sideline to sideline guy, great hips. He'll be walked up in the A gap and flip quickly to drop into a hook window or a curl window. For me, with a guy like that, with the athleticism, the hip flexibility that he has, to me, he looks like a coverage guy. He looks like a guy you're going to go to him and say, hey, we want you covering the seam route. We want you to be able to drop under that, the deeper developing routes. To me, I don't know if he's going to be a man-on-man tight end killer by any means, but when you look at a guy who you're asking to zone drop and to cover a deeper window as a linebacker, absolutely, I think he can do that. I know Ohio State put him in about 1 million different spots. He's done just about everything defensively. Rushing the passer, he's great. He gets a great first step, but hey, like if this guy can cover, that's kind of where you want him.
Yeah, I would pay for a debate between you and Nick, because Nick is swearing up and down that he's going to be an edge, and it just cracks me up because he's just too good, too smooth, and too athletic in coverage to not utilize him there.
Well, and that's actually kind of something I was going to go back to. And Robert jumping in here asking if he's good in coverage. And yes, he actually is pretty good in coverage. Like Luke was saying, like Eric has said before, his hips are very fluid. He turns and runs very well. The one thing that you got to question, though, is that processing. And I'm not exactly sure how that looks at the next level. He's a little bit slow to process things. But that's a debate that's been going around Broncos country, really kind of the NFL draft circles for several months now, even going back to the Senior Bowl, is where are you going to play him? Like, is he going to be that rotational edge defender and develop into the next Von Miller role where he drops back into coverage every now and again and goes against a tight end? Or is he going to be a true off-ball linebacker in the mold of like a Luke Kuechly, where you can drop him off and just rely on him in coverage and turn and run with tight ends and whatnot? Now, Luke, I'm really curious, though. What do you think of his versatility, and do you think that he can be effective coming off of the edge?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think you have a guy who's that versatile, who can do a bunch of different things. It gets him more opportunities to get on the field. That he can do that many more different things for you. So, there's never been a guy when you just look at him and say, gosh, if only he did less things so well, right? That just as a coach puts you in the position of, hey, we know this guy's an athlete. We know this guy's a good football player. We just have to find a way to get him on the field some way, somehow, in a way that he's going to contribute. And it also forces a defense to account for him in multiple ways, saying, hey, scouting report, this guy can cover, this guy can rush the passer. Is he as good against the run? I think he needs to improve there a little bit. But, in terms of coverage ability, yeah, he can flip his hips, he can cover deep. And, 20 years we saw that completely revolutionized defenses in the NFL with the Tampa 2, when you have guys who can drop deep and cover the seam. Now Tampa 2's dead because you have better athletes now. But like this is the kind of guy where you look at that and say, hey, if he can flip his hips, if he can get deep from the linebacker position and cover deep against a receiver, yeah, absolutely, you'll take that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Now, I have one question for you, and it's going to be a little bit long-winded getting to it, just because it talks about his versatility. And when I wrote up my scouting report on him, one of the things that I mentioned was Browning was a do-whatever, asked of him type of linebacker, and it really speaks to his versatility and how quickly he can pick things up. The problem that arises is that there isn't a clear transition on where to play him in the NFL, because he has strengths and weaknesses that are major for each linebacker position that he might project at. Now, Vic Fangio, after the draft, he said something very similar. He said he's a good athlete, runs very well, he's got versatility. Sometimes his versatility has hurt him a little bit in his development. We'll figure out where we're going to put him first and see how he does there, and then make a final decision at some point. We like his speed, like his athleticism. We think he will be a major contributor on special teams and compete for one of our linebacker spots. Now, being a coach, is there such thing as too much versatility and it being able to hurt a player, especially when you're trying to transition to the NFL?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're throwing a guy into a brand new scheme like this, yeah, you want to simplify things for him as much as possible if he's going to be playing more than one position. You'll probably see them try him at a couple different positions through the first couple weeks of camp or OTAs. Just say, hey, can he do this for us? Can he do this for us? But at the end of the day, if he just does one thing, at a certain point, you kind of have to say, all right, let's stop. Let's actually give him this one thing and let him just get really good at this. Because there is something to be said for spreading a guy too thin, and for trying to do too much with him at the end of the day. I think that's a point well made and well taken. And, with a guy like Browning, at a certain point, he's going to have to play a position in the NFL. You can scheme things that from that position, he can do multiple things, whether it's rushing the passer, dropping in coverage, whatever the case may be. But at a certain point, he's going to have, a label next to his name in the coach's office as a position.
Yeah. So, Eric, you kind of keep stealing my questions here. Every time I'm like, Eric, I got a question for you. Talking in our private chat, and I'm like, Eric, I had a follow-up question. I want your opinion on this. Now, the Broncos actually just got done doing this kind of the same thing with a guy, Justin Hollins. He was out of Oregon, 6'6", 255, 265, something like that. And he had the athleticism to play off ball. And I was just going to kind of ask your question and your opinion here on cross-training and everything. So you really kind of stole my question there. I don't necessarily appreciate that, man. Dang it. But as far as so, Eric, I want your opinion here. How would you handle the Baron Browning situation here? Are you going to cross-train him, or are you going to just identify that one role?
I would give him one role, one aspect, let him learn it, and then try to move him on from there. Justin Hollins was a little bit different of a situation, and I think that you learned your lesson with that mistake. They tried asking too much of him too soon. And when he first saw action in a game, it was as an off-ball linebacker, something that he hardly ever did. I mean, when he dropped into coverage at Oregon, it was from the edge. He wasn't playing off-ball. It was something completely out of the norm. With Baron Browning, there is a big difference here. He has played off the edge. He has played off-ball. He has done these things before, so it's not as big of a transition. But I'm giving him one thing to learn, one thing early on. Let him learn that, and then see, and from there slowly add more onto his plate.
Man, Mike S. jumping in here with some praise for you, Eric. Easy here, man. His ego's already big enough as it is, and we don't need to boost it anymore. But Eric, you've written some great articles here lately from Mike.
These nice comments, they just make my head bigger. And what you guys don't realize, I'm actually sitting like 6 feet away from my webcam, and that's why my head looks so big. Is you guys just keep inflating my head.
So this question directed to, for Luke, and it was something that I had said from Robert Cazzo jumping in here, and he always comes with really good questions and to get some really good insight here. I was talking about Baron Browning and his processing ability. And so Robert is not quite sure what I mean here. When you say process, is that as the play occurs or when the offense is setting up? So, Luke, I want your kind of take on both of that, because it is a little bit of both, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're running, a coverage to a 3-by-1 formation, if you've got, say a specific coverage that you're going to run where you're reading, number 2 and number 3's release, right? The second and third inside receivers. First and foremost, you've got to process that pre-snap if it's 3 true receivers to your side, or if it's a receiver and 2 tight ends, right? You have to understand, okay, here's my alignment based on what the formation is. Here's my alignment based on what my assignment is, and then I actually have to know what my keys on the field are. Now, for me, most processing happens post-snap, where, if you're zone dropping, right, you're reading the releases of different receivers, and based on their route pattern, based on the distribution of those, then you know who you're covering based on that. You might have a guy, you own a certain guy running vertical and a certain guy if he goes shallow. So you're just kind of reading those releases to say, oh, he's going vertical, I own this guy, or oh, he's going out, so I'm going to pick up the shallow here. So a lot of it is just understanding, processing, knowing your alignment, your assignment, and your keys, and saying, okay, if I have to wall number 3, I'm going to wall number 3 until he goes out, whatever the case may be.
That's great stuff, man. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, real quick, I want to grab Eric's question here. It says, I'm excited about Browning. I wasn't before the draft, but we got a steal. I wish we went Quinn, then Spencer Brown, but I love Browning. The issue with this is that Spencer Brown went before Quinn Miners.
Yep.
So that's the only issue with there. And from what I understand is that Denver had 3 offensive tackles sniped out of them. One of them was at 70 when the Carolina Panthers traded up and selected Brady Christensen out of BYU. Mm-hmm. And then when the Bills took Spencer Brown, and then they just went with Quinn Miners, their next highest guy on their board, and then Baron Browning after that. So it just was a matter of they just got sniped for their offensive tackles. And then Brian Greenfield comes in with the $5 donation. Thank you, Brian. We really appreciate that. We appreciate all of your guys' support.
Yeah,
as always. Now, moving on to the safeties, the dual safeties here. Give us some quick thoughts about Caden Stearns and Jamar Johnson.
I'll start with Stearns because to me, he's bought into the team and he's bought into the culture. And you see that in the way he plays. He knows he's a captain. He knows he's got that C on his chest and he plays like it. Just a hustle guy, relentless effort. And he's a guy when, he's a senior, you got a freshman walking in and you want to say, okay, what does this defense's culture and our program look like? You pull up a guy like that on film and say, this is what you do. Now, as a football player, I think he's certainly got some improvement left. I think he lunges tackling a little bit. You'd love to see him kind of track the hip a little bit more. He does bring some pop when he makes contact, but he's just a little bit inconsistent with it. The nice thing about him is he's kind of used as that field safety where a lot of the time he'll roll down when they blitz the overhang. So he's going to be used as that kind of cover down on a slot receiver so that he can kind of let the box guys fit the box. So he's not a great man coverage safety, but he takes great angles and he really is an effective guy rolling down to cover that slot receiver.
Yeah, I actually really like Caden Stearns because I saw some versatility with him. He really is a true split field safety. He's doesn't have the range to work as a single high kind of a guy. So this is a good fit for the Broncos, especially with the physicality that he plays with. He's not scared to go and get physical. And as you were kind of saying, there is some sloppiness in his tackling. He lunges out and gets overextended. And he'll miss something every now and again. That's a pretty coachable thing. And I think that Vic Fangio is going to value that. Obviously, he drafted the guy, so he's going to value that physicality. Now, as far as his coverage skills, one thing that I didn't necessarily like is he does look a little stiff every now and again. He doesn't turn and run very well, and that alludes to your point about him not being a man coverage guy. Is that something that he can overcome at the next level, or is that something that the Broncos are really going to have to kind of scheme around if he gets out on the field?
Well, I think part of that just comes down to usage, right? If you're going to play him lined up 5 yards off of a receiver in the slot, you're basically declaring, hey, I own this guy, right? If you use him the way that Texas used him a lot of the time, where they'll line up in that too high structure and he'll kind of roll down to cover that receiver, right? That gives them a little bit more space, a little bit more cushion, and you can kind of hide some deficiencies there. Realistically, if a guy has tight hips in college, he's probably going to have tight hips for the most part in the NFL. They can do some things, but athletically, you can only do so many things. Same for us. If we get a tight-hipped guy in high school coming into college, odds are he's going to be tight-hipped in college as well. So there are some things you can do to kind of improve that, just kind of footwork drills, improving that. But a lot of the time, you just say, all right, we're going to have to scheme around this a little bit. And, credit to Texas. They did a great job of scheming and using him to his fullest potential.
Yeah. Eric, I want to jump in on your opinion here, and we're going to kind of move forward just a little bit because I want to get to Seth Williams really bad. We got about 15 more minutes here. The Broncos, after they took Caden Stearns, I don't remember the exact number. It was, I think, 142 or something like that, 152 and then 164, I think, is what they actually took Jamar Johnson. But I really think that Jamar Johnson is a major steal in this class, a safety out of Indiana. This is a guy that you kind of put me on there for a while and saying that Richie Grant was not as good as Jamar Johnson in the range and everything like that. Give us a breakdown on Jamar Johnson, and what do you think is the biggest reason for him falling as far as he did? Because everybody, from what I understand, thought that he was going to be a day 2 pick, probably an early day 2 pick, one of the top 3 or 4 safeties off the board.
Who are you asking?
Jamar Johnson here.
Are you asking me or Luke? That's the question.
I'm asking you, Eric.
Oh, okay. From what I understand, one of the reasons why he fell is that they just view his games, and he had one good one, and the rest were just meh. I mean, this is a guy who he's not the best, most reliable as a tackler, doesn't have the greatest of experience, and just all these issues. And they just compile and just saw him drop a little bit. I think his game against Ohio State was fantastic, and I think that was enough that should have got him drafted on day 2 because that was just the height of competition for him. And he performed well. I mean, he made that Justin Fields' worst game in college. Like, it's not even close, really. But, I mean, he just got the range. He's got the coverage skills. He's got the smarts. It's just coming downhill as a run defender, his tackling, that's just problematic. And I'm going to pass it off to Luke here about Jamar Johnson. But first, stepping back real quick to Caden Stearns, I need you to answer a question for me. Based on the traits that you saw with him, is he a safety or is he a corner?
Interesting.
For me or for Luke here?
For Luke.
Interesting. I think he's kind of what Lance talked about a little bit, right? To me, he's a split field safety. I think you give him a half the field, you let him own that field. I don't really see him as a corner. I don't think he has the hip flexibility. I don't think he has the stickiness to be a corner. I think he's a good 2-high safety at the end of the day.
That's
another thing that one Mr. Nick Kendall has been arguing with me about. Oh, Caden Stearns is going to play is going to be a corner. No.
Just quick here, though, because this is actually an interesting question. Again, Robert jumping in here with fire on the questions here. In a nickel, is it always 3 cornerbacks and 2 safeties, or is that changeable? And this might be where Nick might be coming in here. Can Caden Stearns play the big nickel role as a third safety on the field?
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of answer that right there, right? You just kind of call it a big nickel, which is when you put a safety on the field. So you'll a lot of the time you'll see teams like the Patriots have really used that effectively because of the safeties that they've had. With a guy like Patrick Chung who can play underneath. The Cardinals really kind of started the trend with. His name escapes me. Deontay Buchanan. Was that the cat? The safety who ended up playing linebacker. The guy for the Rams who went to the Giants, Alec Ogletree. He was another one who's kind of been that. So that's kind of been a trend. To me, that's not really a true nickel defense because you're not doing a lot of things that are 3 safety oriented. You look at a college defense like an Iowa State, and that is a true 3-high safety defense. And the amount of disguising that they can do is really impressive. To me, you're just putting a different body in a linebacker role and kind of just rolling with it. So in terms of nickel versus big nickel, it kind of just depends personnel wise who you put on the field. To me, I think Caden Stearns has a lot of development. And to me, if you're bringing him onto the field, it means you're going to free up a guy to play closer to the line of scrimmage, and you want him playing that deeper safety role. Yeah.
All right, so I know you have some thoughts on Jamar Johnson, and I'm really curious on your breakdown on him. I thought he was super rangy. I thought he could play single high if he wanted him to. It probably works better in the split field role. Wears multiple hats, doesn't necessarily tackle very well, but he's willing to get there. What are your thoughts on Jamar Johnson, and is he as big of a steal as I thought he is?
I mean, I'm not one to talk about draft value. I know you've been on the Jamar Johnson train for a long time. I'm not here to say he's a steal. I'm here to say he's a really, really good football player. I think he's got tremendous hip flexibility in a way that we talk about Caden Stearns, and he doesn't really have that. For me, he plays the run effectively. You talk about that Ohio State game. Indiana mixed up so many looks in that game, and a lot of it revolved around what he could do. They blitzed him from depth as that kind of extra add-on rusher where the offense can't account for him, and he was disruptive. He flew downhill, got pressure on the quarterback, and at the end of the day, if you're rushing a safety from depth, you want him to impact the quarterback, and you want him to hurry up his decision-making. He knows his responsibilities. He knows where his eyes need to be. He's a great example of, he's doing his 1/11th on every play. You'll hear coaches talk about doing your 1/11th, and he's not trying to do anybody else's job. He's doing his, and he's doing a great job of it. For me, the one kind of real illustration of this is when you talk about disguising coverages. A lot of the time, teams will line up with what I call as a receivers coach, middle of the field open, right? Split field. So you've got 2 safeties high, your kind of classic cover 2, cover 4 look. We kind of just talked about this with Caden Stearns, right? They're going to rock down to kind of a single high look where that safety to the field rolls down and ends up covering the slot. One thing that Indiana did in that Ohio State game, and this really is just absolutely essential to have a guy like Jamar Johnson who can do this on the field, is they would roll from this, which is what I would call middle of the field closed, right? You've got a single high safety, and they would actually roll to a middle of the field open. So they're actually rolling him from kind of closer to the line of scrimmage back to a deeper safety role. And think about that. That's much more of an impressive transition because you're asking a guy to have to run backwards at the snap and transition to a back pedal and still stay over receivers. And so to me, you can't do that if you don't have a guy with the hip flexibility that a Jamar Johnson does. And it's easy to go from here to here, right? Because you're just asking one guy to walk up and one guy to roll to the middle of the field. You do both, one guy walking for it is physics, and guy rolling to the middle of the field you do every day in practice, right? That's just an everyday drill. But actually asking a guy to bail and actually get to that second high safety, that's a lot more impressive to me.
That's an amazing breakdown. And I wish that the people that are listening to this podcast after the fact could see the way that you worked your hands on that to really kind of highlight what you were talking about there. And I agree with you. The hip flexibility with Jamar Johnson and the range and the extended field of motion that he has with his vision, he does a really good job identifying what's going on in front of him. He's a very smart and intellectual player. He understands route concepts, drives on the football really well. It's just those tackling issues on the back end. And as a safety, you can't have that. Now, Erick, what really sold you on Jamar Johnson being the fan of him that you were? I know that you had him, safety 4 or something like that? I can't remember. I know you had him, I think, as a top 5 safety.
I think he was right at my number 5. But what sold me on him was just those skills and coverage. And it was a lot of what Luke just talked about, being what they asked of him to do, being quite a lot more impressive than what you mostly see anymore of what's being asked of your safeties. And he did it just so well. He's so smooth in coverage. He's got that range. He just brings so much added versatility. I would have probably had him as my number 2 safety if he was just more consistent as a tackler. Like, I love him. He was my favorite guy, my favorite safety when it came to coverage, like just pure coverage. He was my favorite safety in this class, even better than Trevon Merrick out of TCU, who many felt was the best cover safety in the class. I thought that Jamar Johnson was even better than that with everything that he brought. It's just that run defense, that tackling inconsistency, those are just problems to me. So I like him, and I said this before. I think I said it when we were live on day 3. Is I view it as the future, even though Caden Stearns was drafted higher. I view Caden Stearns as the future number 3 safety, and I see Jamar Johnson as that replacement for Kareem Jackson.
And the one other thing I will say just real quick, I mean, you talk about the deficiencies with tackling. Again, you hope that NFL coaching can absolutely coach that up. I see Robert Kessler just asked the same question. Yeah, you can absolutely coach tackling. Different teams will coach it different ways. I mean, the Seahawks have kind of led the charge in coaching rugby tackling, and that's really, improved for them. But for me, when I look at Caden Stearns and I look at Jamar Johnson, to me, they are incredibly complementary players. Caden Stearns, if you're in a too high safety structure, he's going to be that field safety, who you can roll down, and you can just put, if you're going to roll to single high, Jamar Johnson's the other guy. Realistically, if Caden Stearns gets a little bit better at tackling, you're probably going to stick him back into the boundary where he's going to fit the run and just let Jamar Johnson, just let him play with all that space over to the field. I know we kind of talked about last time about field boundary and kind of how that's not as relevant really at the NFL level with how tight the hashes are. But for me, I think they're incredibly complementary players. And you talk about getting into a big nickel package. I think you can easily do that with the 2 of them. And then, a guy underneath like a Justin Simmons, who can kind of just roam and cause havoc a little bit, because I think those 2 guys are really consistent in the back end.
Yeah, great stuff, man. Always, every single time you come on, I'm just blown away. It's. I thought I know a lot about football, and I really know nothing. Malcolm Brown jumping in here with the $2 super chat. Good job, guys. # Erick's halibut fun. Hey, I got to get up there one of these days. We got to go halibut fishing. It's gonna happen. It may not happen until after I get married next year, but it's gonna happen. So hopefully, I'll be able to go up and go catch some halibut with you now. Luke, this is the one that I was intrigued honestly by your Javonte Williams take, but I'm really intrigued by Seth Williams here. 6'3", 211, ran a 4.49, so you've got some sort of height, weight, speed. He's not the greatest speed athlete as well that you'll ever see. Can take the top off the defense, big catch radius. I love him in the red zone. You're the wide receivers coach at Kenyon College, and you watch this guy, I'm assuming a lot to come into the show and got a pretty decent idea about him. What does he bring outside of that red zone versatility for the Broncos?
I think day one, he's a great red zone target. Day one, I'm not really sure what else he kind of provides. I think that's a lot of things that they're going to need to develop him for. You talk about height, weight, speed. You talk about being an NFL-sized body and looking like an NFL player. Trait-wise, from what I saw in college, I'm kind of, to be honest, I felt a little bit lacking looking at him. I felt like I was kind of missing a little bit more. He's one of those ones where it feels, and I know I talk about this extensively, as a coach, you're just going to say, hey, bring me your best athlete, bring me the biggest, fastest, strongest guy you can, and I'm going to coach him up to be a weapon. I'm going to coach him up to be a monster. So with him, he's played inside, he's played outside. he does a pretty good job staying unpredictable for defensive backs. I see a couple of different releases in his toolbox already. I think kind of a big weapon, or I should say a big mark of respect, was that J.C. Horn, I'm pretty sure, shadowed him in that South Carolina game. He seemed to be following him everywhere he went. And when you're dedicating a guy like that to no matter where he travels, that's a sign of respect by the defense. The one thing I really kind of noticed with him and route running wise, I think it's something that's going to get fixed at the next level, is he airplanes at times. And airplanes is a very technical receiver coach term. Basically what that means is, say he's running a comeback or say he's running a dig, right? He starts off low in his stance. He's kind of firing. And then the closer he gets to that break point, you kind of see him standing higher up, right? You want to keep a nice, consistent upper body posture and upper body structure throughout the whole route, because otherwise, if you're getting up here, the defensive back knows exactly when you're going to break. And so I think that's one thing he can do to stay even more unpredictable for defensive backs. For me, inside the 20, he's a great red zone target day one. Between the 20s, he needs some refinement, in my opinion.
Yeah, Malachi, I hope that's a really good answer. Sorry, Eric. Malachi Martin came in and said, how come Seth Williams never separated from defensive backs? I hope that answers your question. Great job, Luke.
And actually, my question was, my biggest weakness that I saw on him when I was watching him is that he can't separate. And in the NFL, the name of the game with receivers is you got to be able to separate from defensive backs. Now, obviously, he's got that height, he's got that weight, and that size of his, you don't necessarily always have to separate. How much can that lack of separation be covered up with the size and length that he has?
I'm going to kind of co-opt an old expression here, right? You talk about the college triangle. You can have 2 of 3 things in college: sleep, a social life, and good grades. Pick 2 of the 3, right? I think a lot of the times with NFL players, you can have, or I should say with NFL receivers, you can have 2 of the 3: size, athleticism, and separation, right? Like, he's got 2 of the 3. If he had all 3, he'd be a day one guy, right? I don't think anybody's going to sit here and say that an SEC receiver who's 6'3" and can go up and get a great contested catch, he wouldn't go day one. Absolutely, he would. So I think that's probably the reason he's slipped this far. And again, you kind of you get a guy like him who you just see the traits. You see, okay, look, he can go up and get it. We can work with a guy who goes up and attacks the football. That's really what you're going to kind of have to work on, is making him a little bit even more unpredictable for defensive backs. Adding more to his release toolbox, moving him around the formation to cause matchups, against a safety or against a nickel corner, right? He's the kind of guy who you say, look, day one, is he going to win against the best outside cornerbacks in the league? Probably not. But can we develop him there? Sure. And can we move him around and scheme that up in the meantime to make sure that we can get him there? Absolutely.
And real quick, got a question for you, but I want to grab this one from Miguel. Can you guys get Brandon Perna on, please? The better person to ask would be Chad and Zach. I know that Chad used to have I'm not sure if anything happened, so if there is, I'm not sure, but I know that Chad used to do something with Brandon pretty regularly, so maybe that would be the better one to ask. Not so much us. I have nothing but respect for Brandon, but he's definitely closer to Chad than he is us. But the question I have for you, and as it pertains to Kerry Vincent Jr., is Robert Caslow asks, what is Fangio's cover scheme? And real quick, it's a match quarters. But can you give a quick explanation of what match quarters is and how somebody like Kerry Vincent can step in and have a role in it?
The kind of new buzzword these days is hybrid schemes, where it's part man and part zone, where you're asking defenders to not just say, hey, I've got this guy, you've got that guy, cover them, right? You're asking defenders to kind of do a little bit more than that. So a lot of the time, and every scheme works differently, everybody runs things different ways. For what a match quarter scheme is, you're basically asking the defenders to read releases, and if one guy does one thing, if the outside receiver runs vertical and the inside receiver runs out, right, you're going to have, say, in a kind of a 2-read scheme where you're matching routes, you're going to have the corner play to the flat route and the safety is going to get over the top, which looks like cover 2, but it plays like cover 4. So match quarters itself is a wide world. People run things a million different ways. I don't think there's any one universal rule of match quarters. I know there's some great resources out there. Cody Alexander is a great coach on Twitter who's great follow. He's written a book. I think it's called The Art of Match Quarters. So highly recommend recommend that as a resource if you're looking to learn more. I'm a simple wide receiver coach.
I was going to say that Cody Alexander series, The Making of the Modern Hybrid Defense. There was another one I can't remember, and then the match quarter stuff. I have all of that upstairs. And, man, you want to talk about some incredibly technical football, man. Like I said, I thought I knew something about football. You dive into some of those coaching books, and it's just, whew. But, yeah, that match quarters deal, I actually drew up a play diagram, and I kind of shared it here for a little while. I want to show you just a little bit more of this here really fast to kind of explain some more of it. And this is a very, very basic look at what we've got going on here, guys. If I can actually see what I've got here. Maybe not. Where's that? Can I get to here? There it is. Okay. So obviously cover 4 look, and the way that it works is you've got your safeties is the biggest key here, and they're keying on the inside receivers and everything like that. You're matching the route of the inside receivers. Your cornerbacks have boundary looks only. Anything breaking to the outside, that's the way that they have to go. Your linebackers have to wall. Anything coming across the middle of the field, bail to the flat. It's a very complex, very intricate scheme, and this doesn't do any justice to what is actually going on with that defense. But it does kind of give you at least a decent look at what is really going on in a match quarter scheme. So sorry for anybody that can't see this live and is or listening to this after the fact, but there's a lot of literature out there, and match quarters is something that's incredibly difficult to understand. Quite honestly, there's overhang safeties you got to worry about, field rotation. You've got counting your wide receivers, identifying your formation. What is your responsibility within that? What is your responsibility within the keys? How you're supposed to play that responsibility, pass off responsibility to another receiver. I mean, it's very, very, very intricate. And that's a big reason why everywhere Vic Fangio has gone, his defense takes a big step in year 2 and an even bigger step in year 3 as the continuity in the scheme. And everybody starts to learn the verbiage and learn that transition language over and over again. Year 3 in Vic Fangio's defense, especially with the way that they have retooled, they've retooled the secondary. This defense could be legitimately scary. Luke, what do you think about all the players that the Broncos have added to this secondary, given all the injuries that they had last year?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to what you're talking about, anytime you run a complex scheme, giving players additional years and additional time to develop within the scheme is great. You kind of always run the risk of, even with guys who've been around the league or been around college for a number of years, who've played in different schemes, if you bring in a free agent and they don't know your scheme, then they're going to kind of be back to square one. They may be pretty familiar with the overall coverages and families, but maybe not with the way that you run it specifically. So you look at a guy like Kyle Fuller, who has run Vic Fangio's scheme. There's not going to be a learning curve with him, right? He's done this since a long time ago. So, I think that's one thing where, there's always going to be a learning curve. There's always going to be adjustments for people. But when it comes to that, you're going to have guys who come in and just really know the scheme and who are going to be able to perform.
Yeah. Now, before we get to a couple comments here in the chat, I have one question for you, and I know you're going to hate me for it. As a Broncos fan, what do you think they do this year? What do you think their record will be?
That's a great question. I honestly think it's gonna any football team, I firmly believe, will go as far as the quarterback will take them. And so that kind of just at the end of the day, do you believe in the quarterback? Do you not believe in the quarterback? Do you believe in Drew Lock? Do you believe in Teddy Bridgewater? Do you believe in he who must not be named in Wisconsin? At the end of the day, it kind of depends who's leading the offense. And, you can get a great football player like Javonte Williams and hand him the ball 20, 25 times a game. And, he may not win you a football game. He's only a running back, I guess. But, he can still go a long way towards that. So I look at the division that Denver finds themselves in. I think we're – in my opinion, Denver is going to be lucky to kind of, compete with some of the best teams in a very competitive conference. And, realistically, unless Kansas City takes a step back, the division is kind of set up for them pretty much every year when you have a guy like Mahomes behind center. And until really any kind of team can develop their own guy or find that guy, that becomes an issue. So the homer in me always says 17-0. The realist and the football coach in me says, you got to have an established quarterback, and the Broncos are kind of left with a couple guys who aren't an established quarterback. So one of them's going to have to step up. They're going to have to find a guy. And either way, the talent is in place. I just worry about everything kind of clicking together.
Man. Okay. Now, Record-wise.
I was going to say, answer the question,
I'll give you an out. I'll give you an out here. I'll give you two. One with Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, and one with A.A. Ron.
I mean, anytime you bring in a Hall of Fame quarterback, we've seen it in Denver. Like that changes the course of a franchise. If you add Aaron Rodgers to any, sorry, I said the name. If you add that player, Aaron Rodgers, to any roster on any team, you could take Wisconsin Whitewater and put them in the NFL. They're going to be a Super Bowl contender because of Aaron Rodgers. And I firmly believe that no matter what team has Aaron Rodgers, they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. I honestly, this is not me copping out. I haven't watched enough Drew Lock to have a take on him. I'm not jumping into the love or hate Drew Lock pool of commentary. I'm not going to go there. I will say that I think that they need more consistent play from the quarterback position. And I think everyone can appreciate that. Whether or not you think Drew Lock is the guy, they need a consistent quarterback to step up. Well, if they get that, absolutely they can challenge for a wild card spot. If you want to win in the loss number, I'll give you 9 and 7. And if they don't get an established quarterback, if they don't get consistent play, I think the team will struggle.
Yeah. I actually agree with you on that. And obviously the turnovers, the biggest thing is the turnovers. The Broncos got to stop turning the football over as much as they do. And then they have to create some turnovers on the other side. I mean, they had a negative 16 turnover differential, Luke, last year, negative 16. You think that's winning football? Like, is that going to win you a lot of games? Probably not.
That's one of the stats that has been most correlated to winning and losing football games. Yep. Is the actual turnover differential. If you lose the turnover battle, you have an uphill road. Think about it. Like this is fundamentally for me as a receivers coach, where I tell the guys, hey, ball security is job security. If you are lucky in a football game, the offense will possess the ball 12 times. If you're lucky, you'll get about 12 drives a game. You do the math. Like if you have one turnover, that's 1/12 of your team's opportunity to possess the ball, and you've given the other team an extra 12th of opportunities to possess the ball. If you turn the ball over twice, I'm not a math guy, but what is that? A sixth is what, like 16%, 15%, somewhere in there. Like, again, that is a lot of game time that you are giving to the other team. So yeah, turnovers are absolutely essential to winning football games.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And Drew Lock, I mean, he led the league in interceptions last year through 15 interceptions in 12 games. Like that, regardless of these are facts, these are statistics. You cannot lie about that. 15 interceptions in 12 games, that's not good enough. Like, quite honestly, if you're going to turn the ball over at that kind of a clip, you're hampering your defense and putting them in bad situations. And the Broncos can have a top 5 defense all they want to, but if they're starting on the negative side of the 50-yard line 31 times in a season, you're not going to have any success.
Now, before we get out of here, one question. We're going to take it from my fellow Alaskan here. Malcolm Brown, which draftee would you like to have for a guest? And for me, as much as I like a lot of these guys, it's got to be Quinn Miners. Everything about this kid just screams enthusiastic, just fun, like not quite carefree, but easygoing. Like it would be him.
Yeah, I'm going to reach out to him tomorrow. I mean, he's on Twitter. I follow him on Twitter. I'm going to shoot him a DM and say, hey, dude, what's up? Let's join the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Let's get this off the rails a little bit and have some fun and get to know one of the newest Denver Broncos. But I think, guys, not a whole lot more running into the comment stream. Eric, you got something here?
One more. I think Malachi's asking, why are you not on the Broncos coaching staff, Luke? And I'll answer this one. Luke's not good enough.
There is a long-running coaching expression that there are people who have forgotten more football than I will ever know. Yep. And I've had the great opportunity to meet NFL coaches, and believe me, like I have talked to some amazing football minds, guys who have done this professionally for decades, guys who have coached in the league for decades. Believe me when I say that, like, I consider myself a reasonably football intelligent person, and I forget what a receiver is when I talk to them. Like they're on a whole other plane.
And on that note is Luke actually mentioned it to me about when I was looking at coaching locally, the defensive line coach for Ohio State, name escapes me.
Larry Johnson.
There we go. And had me watch a couple of his seminars and stuff like that. And 45 minutes was all it was, and it took me 10 hours to watch it because I had to keep going back because I kept missing stuff. There is a whole other level. I like to think I know a lot, but compared to these guys in the NFL, I know nothing.
Yeah.
And I mean, they are brilliant. There's a reason why they are part of this elite group of people that gets to coach in the NFL. So I mean, it's just whole other level.
My final take on this before I wrap it up here, guys. I mean, Luke's got the wide receivers and the running backs expert taken care of. I mean, Eric is one of the best interior offensive line, really trench guys as far as evaluating players and stuff goes. My specialty is being a bad analyst. I like to poke fun. I mean, I think I like to think that I do wide receivers, cornerbacks, just because I played the position and understand a little bit of how everything works, but also at the same time, you guys still blow me away every time that we get on. I mean, I learned from Eric, but every time, Luke, you get on as well, I learn so much for you. So thank you very much for your insight, guys. That's going to wrap it up for us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Guys, it's been on the screen all day today. Follow us on Twitter. You find me at Sanderson MHH, for Eric at Erick Trickel, for Luke at Luc Polglaze as well. For the show, guys, while you're at it, at DVDD_pod, easiest way to keep up with what's going on with the Dove Valley Deep Divers. Also, guys, at Mile High Huddle, that's the mother account. It's also the easiest way of getting instant news and analysis on your Denver Broncos, and opinion articles from guys like myself, like Eric, like Nick Kendall, Carl Dumler, Chad, Zach, the whole gang at Mile High Huddle. Also, it's the easiest way to keep up with what's going on with the Huddle Up podcast as well. Also, guys, follow John K, Boana Beast, at John K MHH. Send him some love right now. He kind of deserves it. Going through some rough stuff. Don't want to get into anything personal for him, but just send him some love if you got the opportunity to do so. Facebook users, go to facebook.com/Mile High Huddle. Click the blue Become a Supporter button. It's a great way to support the show. $5 a month gets you exclusive premium content like the Trickel Zone, which, Eric, what do you have on the Trickel Zone this week? Or have you even got there yet?
I haven't even thought about what we're going to be doing. It's going to be what my night is and part of my morning figuring out what we're going to be doing. But, I mean, now that the draft's over, I got to shift my focus. I mean, it was leading up to the draft. It was always just my top 10s, my top 5s. Not sure yet. Maybe something will happen tonight that I can give a takedown on. Maybe I can break into some Aaron Rodgers or Jawan James stuff. Not sure yet. Got to send a text off the chat and figure that out and figure out what the direction of the show is going to be for after the draft.
So tune back in for Eric's way too early top 100 for 2022. Is that what I'm hearing?
There we go. That's what we'll do. My way too early top 100.
I mean, if you've already got a top 100 for next year, there's never a chance of me keeping up with you. But anyways, guys, facebook.com/Mile High Huddle. Click the blue Become a Supporter button. You get the Trickel Zone. You get Kelberman's Corner on Sundays at noon. I'm looking to do a kickstart here as well, as far as breaking down some tape for you guys called the 5280 View. Still got to get the works in the Kingston and stuff figured out for that as well. But also, guys, another great way to support the show, get one of these hats right here, this Dove Valley Deep Divers hat. There's also t-shirts, face masks, coffee cups, everything like that, anything to suit your fancy at huddleuppod.com. That's the merch tent. Get something. It's a great way to help support the show. And if you guys are not financially able to do anything like that, the 3 easiest things that everybody should be doing by now is subscribe where you guys are watching this, particularly on YouTube, but also on Twitch, on Facebook, on Twitter, anywhere you guys are getting this Mile High Huddle content. Subscribe to it, like every video you guys see, and if you love it, share it out in front of as many Broncos fans as you possibly can, because that is the most easy and organic way you can support and help grow the show, because without you guys, we could not do what we do best, which is break down your Denver Broncos. Now, before we get out of here, Eric, Luke, any last words?
Well, I just want to say thank you, guys. It's always a pleasure to be on. Thank you for continuing to put up with me. Little bit of ribbon here now and there, but I mean, it was a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Special shout out to Malachi. I appreciate it. Maybe someday I'll be on the Broncos coaching staff, but I'm a long way away from that. But thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great having you on. It always is, and. Some point we got to get around to playing some Apex so I can carry you some more.
I really want to get you on sometime if we get this 5280 view going around and start talking some schemes and stuff like that. So maybe we can work in a little bit more if you have some time over the summer and whatnot on breaking down route concepts, breaking down coverage schemes and stuff like that, how you would attack that as a wide receivers coach. I think that would be some pretty decent stuff. If you're willing to do that, I'd definitely extend the invite to you, man.
Yeah, it'd be a pleasure. I'd love to. Absolutely.
All right. So guys, with that, that's the end of the Dove Valley Deep Diver show. You guys stay safe. Have a great weekend and also take care. We'll see you guys next week. Same time, same place. And as always, as we sign off, go Broncos.